The first signal of the morning came thin as breath over the sea. 3 quick pulses, one long, then silence. Inside the Willow Point signal room, 5 monitors flashed red error boxes. A row of young technicians leaned closer, ears tilted to headsets that spat static. Someone groaned, another cursed softly. Their keyboards clicked like hail against metal. At the end of the row sat Harold Reeves, maintenance tech by title, radio operator by heart. He wore a gray cardigan that smelled of coffee grounds and old solder. In front of him, a leather-bound logbook lay open beside a scuffed headset. He listened through the noise eyes, half-closed pencil hovering over paper. "Got another error," someone said. "Maybe the weather station's looping again." The youngest, Eli Tran, looked across the room and noticed Harold writing instead of typing. The old man's hand moved slow, methodical ... dash. Then he paused to count seconds on his watch. Cal Mercer, their 20-something lead technician, spun his chair around. "Sir, we use software now." The room chuckled. Someone mimicked a telegraph click. Harold did not answer. He simply smiled, a crease folding beneath each eye. He kept writing in the logbook as if time were still measured in dots and pauses. Cal leaned back. "Guess old habits die on paper." "You kids," Harold said quietly, "trust Wi-Fi more than wisdom." A few snorts of laughter rose. Eli didn't join them. He watched the pencil move, listening to the static beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. The morning sun bled through a thin, salt-streaked window. Coffee dripped slowly into the shared pot by the door. Somewhere a clock ticked off another minute. The room smelled of metal-burnt dust and routine. Then it came again, 3 short pulses, one long. No pattern the software could read. The monitors blinked, unrecognized. Harold straightened slightly, pencil hovering. The sound cut through the room like memory itself. He began to write, and underlined the line, once hand steady while the others frowned at their screens. "Still noise," Cal said. Maybe Harold murmured, "Maybe it's something trying to be heard." No one answered. Only the static did, rolling soft and endless through the room. The fluorescent light buzzed a steady halo over his shoulder. He closed the logbook, tapped it once with his pencil, and looked toward the antenna tower outside. A draft of cold air slipped under the door as he whispered to himself, not loud enough for anyone to catch. 3 short, 1 long. I've heard that before. The room returned to its routine monitors, blinking coffee pouring, but Eli kept watching the old operator's hand still resting on the closed book, like a promise not yet spoken. By noon, the storm had rolled in from the Gulf wind, pressing against the signal tower until its guy wires sang. Inside the control room, fluorescent light wavered with every surge. The automated decoder kept spitting red warnings. Feed error. Signal corrupt. Lines of code rippled, rebooted, failed again. The air smelled faintly of ozone and instant coffee. Harold sat at the far desk, his old logbook now half filled with careful rows of dots and dashes. Each group matched nothing the system could parse. He turned a page, slow, steady, the way men once tuned dials by ear. Cal muttered, "That feed's looping again." "Maybe the relay's iced," another said. The software stuttered, screens flashing red across the line. A single window blinked, manual override detected. Cal swung his chair toward Harold. "Your notebook jammed the feed." Harold looked up, puzzled. "Paper doesn't jam circuits." "You logged into maintenance last night, didn't you?" Cal pressed. "For a light check." "Sure. Now the signal's unreadable." A silence settled, broken only by rain tapping the window panes. Harold closed the logbook carefully, its spine frayed like an old uniform sleeve. "I just write what I hear," he said. "You hear ghosts, Mr. Reeves." Eli Tran hesitated at his console, eyes shifting between the monitor and the old man's face. The kid had grown up with Bluetooth and Storm apps, yet something in Harold's stillness unsettled him, the way he seemed to listen even when nothing spoke. The thunder rolled closer. Lights dimmed, flickered, steadied. A red message scrolled, "Auto decoder fail." Harold leaned forward, adjusting the manual gain. Beneath the static, he caught a pulse, 3 short, 1 long, repeating with a faint echo like breath against glass. "There," he whispered. "It's not weather, it's interference," Cal said, already typing commands. Harold didn't answer. The rhythm deepened, each gap exact. The pencil lifted again, ... His hand trembled once, then steadied. He was pinned by protocol, not by hands, the kind of rule that told him to stand down, to let younger men decide what mattered. Still, he wrote. Eli stepped closer. "Sir, what if it's intentional?" Harold's eyes met his. "Then someone out there remembers the code." Lightning cracked beyond the window, bright enough to outline the sea antenna in white. The glass vibrated, humming the same 4-beat rhythm. Cal turned, half shouting over the rain. "We're shutting this channel. It's throwing errors across the board." "Then it's saying something new," Harold replied. The kid glanced at the screen, error reset static. Somewhere between those blanks, the pattern lived quiet but insistent. For a moment, nobody spoke. The hum of machines filled the space like breath. Harold stared at the antenna water sliding down the glass. He whispered more to himself than anyone. Or was the signal trying to warn us? The storm broke apart by evening, leaving the harbor washed clean and humming. Across from the base, the harbor diner flickered in red neon light. The word "coffee" reflected in every puddle. Inside, Harold Reeves sat alone in a booth near the window. His old logbook lay open beside a half-empty cup, pages wrinkled by steam. On a napkin he'd drawn soft waveforms, small mountains of ink, pauses marked with tiny dots. Marion Doyle, the base's communications officer, noticed him while paying her check. "Still decoding ghosts, Harold." He smiled without looking up, just mapping the silence between them. Most of us only listen for noise. That's why we keep missing what matters. The waitress drifted by, topping his cup. "Refill and a slice today, just the refill. Storm took my appetite." She laughed. "Storm takes everyone's tip jar first." The warmth of coffee filled the booth. Steam fogged the glass, softening the glow of the signal tower across the street. Eli Tran, fresh off duty, hesitated near the counter, then joined them. "Mind if I sit?" "Sit and learn," Harold said. "You still think radio's just sound, isn't it?" Harold said. "It's patience. The space between clicks is where people used to breathe." Marion slid into the next seat, curious. "You really think that noise meant something?" Harold lifted the napkin, showing his penciled marks. 3 short, 1 long. Always the same spacing. Not weather. Not static. "The base said your notes jammed the feed," she said. "Funny thing," he replied, "truth jams bureaucracy every time." Eli laughed softly. "Maybe the signal's alive." "Alive," Harold mused. "Maybe it remembers." He reopened the logbook. Half its pages were already filled with groups of dots and lines. "I logged 100 pulses," he said. "They repeat like handwriting, same hesitation before the dash." Marion poured a little cream into her cup, watching the swirl. "Could be coincidence. Could be," Harold said, "or maybe someone's still out there calling home." Outside, Cal Mercer walked past raincoat hood, up earbuds tight, glancing through the glass, but never stopping. Eli noticed. Harold didn't. He was sketching again, every pencil mark steady as heartbeat. Eli asked, "Sir, what if we answered back?" "With what Morse? No," Harold said gently. "With patience." A quiet hung between them. The waitress left the check with a handwritten note. "Thanks for keeping the old tower alive." Marion smiled. "Half this town still thinks you're crazy." Maybe, Harold said, "but it's the right frequency of crazy." Eli grinned. This town's Wi-Fi couldn't decode a weather report. They all laughed, the sound small but genuine. Then from the radio behind the counter, a tone burst through the chatter, 3 short, 1 long. The same rhythm. Everyone froze. Steam curled upward as Harold whispered, "It found us again." Marion's eyes met his. Or maybe it never left. Outside, rain began to fall in even intervals, echoing the code against the diner roof. Rain slammed against the signal room windows, wind howling through every crack in the tower frame. Monitors flickered under emergency power, painting the walls in frantic blue. A red banner blinked across the center screen, "Distress Signal Vessel ID Unknown." The auto-decoder tried, failed, rebooted, failed again. Static filled the room like breath between heartbeats. "Systems hung," Cal Mercer said, fingers tight on the keyboard. Marion Doyle stepped beside him. "Where's it coming from? Offshore Grid 7, a tech replied. "But it's all noise." Through the static came a rhythm, 3 short, 1 long, steady as a pulse. Eli Tran looked up. "That's it, same pattern from this morning. Protocol says we wait for command," Cal warned. "Protocol's late," Eli snapped. Lightning tore open the sky. The hum of machinery deepened. For a moment, no one moved. Then quietly, Harold Reeves rose from his bench. He had waited through years of automation and memos always told to let the machines decide meaning. Tonight, they were silent. "Step aside," he said. Cal frowned. "Sir, you're retired." "So's the code," Harold answered. "But it still works." He lifted the cracked headset, placed it over his ear, and opened his logbook beneath the amber lamp. Rain streaked down the window behind him like lines of ink. Marion asked softly. "You still remember every pause," he said. "Every silence." The signal pulsed again, 3 short, 1 long, then another gap. Harold leaned to the mic, voice calm, measured. "Latitude 71.4, hold bearing east." Each phrase fell between bursts of static, slow and deliberate. He was slammed by procedure, not fear, the old weight of rules pressing him to stand down. Still, he spoke, translating what the computers could not feel. Eli whispered, "He's reading it live." Marion nodded. "By voice, like the old days." Cal stared, disbelief softening into respect. "Sir, how do you know?" "Because noise has grammar," Harold said. "You just forgot to listen." The room dimmed. Only his low tone cut through the hum, turning chaos into cadence. "Signal clear, message confirmed, coordinates locked." The monitors shifted from red to green. "Match accepted." A soft chime echoed once. For the first time that night, nobody spoke. Marion exhaled, half a laugh, half a prayer. "You did it." Eli grinned, eyes bright. "He really did." Cal lowered his headset, voice small. "Guess the system needed a human after all." Harold closed the logbook, the pencil resting neatly across its spine. The noise, he said, just became language again. Outside, thunder rolled away toward the open sea. The tower lights steadied to solid green. He removed the headset, set it gently on the console, and looked to the others. Some signals never fade with time. The alarm went silent. For a breathless moment only, the rain answered. Harold smiled faintly and whispered, "Message received." The storm had blown itself out by dawn. Salt air drifted through Willow Point, carrying the slow rhythm of waves and the faint echo of a church choir warming up 2 streets away. On his front porch, Harold Reeves sat in a worn swing that creaked with each gentle push of his shoe. The old logbook rested on his lap, pages drying in the morning light. The world smelled of coffee and wet pine. A pickup stopped at the curb. Cal Mercer stepped out holding a to-go tray and the kind of cautious smile that came after a sleepless night. "Brought coffee," he said. Harold nodded. "You mean peace offerings?" Both, Cal admitted. He handed over a cup and sat on the porch step, cap in his hands. "You saved them," Cal said quietly. "That boat crew of 3. They made it in just before dawn." "Good," Harold answered. "That's the only result worth logging." Cal looked out at the horizon, embarrassed by the quiet. I recorded the transmission last night. Your voice when you spoke the code. Thought you might want it." He slid a small recorder across the porch boards. Harold turned it over in his palm like a seashell. "That's a sound for the archives, not me. Sir, I misjudged you." "You judged by years," Harold said softly, "not by rhythm." The choir's melody drifted through the air, off-key, comforting. The wind rustled through the porch ferns, fluttering the logbook pages. Eli Tran arrived a few minutes later, clutching 2 muffins in a paper bag. "Morning, Mr. Reeves." "I couldn't sleep." "Too much noise," Harold teased. "Too much thinking. I want to learn. The code, the way you read it." Harold smiled, the kind of smile that rewinds years. He lifted the logbook and placed it in the boy's hands. "Start with patience," he said. "And after that, more patience." Eli flipped through the pages, eyes wide at the neat handwriting. "This might take me a week just to translate 'good morning.'" Harold chuckled. "Then you'll finally learn what it means." Cal watched, listening to the quiet creak of the swing. "You're really giving it away." "Not giving," Harold said. "Passing forward. A signal only works if someone answers." The 3 of them sat there a moment, old operator, young learner, humbled officer, bound not by rank, but by the rhythm of shared silence. From inside the house came the faint crackle of Harold's tabletop radio, the one he'd left tuned to an unused frequency. Static whispered like soft rain. Eli tilted his head. "You hear that always?" Harold said. A single pulse came through, clean, deliberate, then another. Not distress. A test signal. Harold leaned back on the swing, eyes closing to the sound. "They're checking the line," Cal said. "Good," Harold murmured. "Means connection's alive." The choir's voices rose, mixing with the faint radio pulse until the air itself seemed to breathe again. He took a sip of coffee, smile deepening. "The air clears," he said quietly. "You just have to listen long enough." The static faded, leaving morning birdsong in its place. Eli set the logbook on his knees, reverent. Cal looked toward the sea, nodding once. Harold pushed the swing, gently, rhythm steady, 3 short, 1 long. The old code still alive. The morning air held that washed, clean hush that follows every storm. The town museum stood open to the bay, breeze, its doors propped by sandbags, the brass letters above newly polished Willow Point signal room exhibit. Inside, folding chairs lined the narrow hall. The smell of varnish and wet coats mixed with the faint hum of a speaker system waiting for use. At the front, under a linen cover, a small plaque glimmered like a secret not yet told. Harold Reeves waited near the back. His cardigan sleeves were rolled, his hands folded behind him as if listening again to something only he could hear. Marion Doyle, uniform pressed crisp, approached the podium. The murmur faded. "We gather," she said, "to remember a night when machines failed and a man did not." To Operator Harold Reeves, she continued, who spoke the code that brought them home. Every word seemed to echo through the beams. No one clapped. The silence itself honored him. Eli Tran stood beside the display table. He looked both proud and nervous, the way a student might hold an inheritance too heavy to drop. On the table lay the worn logbook pages open beneath glass, and beside it the old headset cord neatly coiled like a sleeping snake. Marion pulled the cloth from the plaque. The engraved lines caught the light. Willow Point Signal Room, dedicated to Operator Harold Reeves, who spoke the code that brought them home. For a moment, all that could be heard was the soft whir of the projector fans and the creak of wooden chairs. Cal Mercer stepped forward from the crowd, cap in hand. "Sir," he said quietly, "the Coast Guard confirmed those men are alive because of you." Harold gave a small nod. "They're alive because someone still listens." A child near the front tugged his mother's sleeve. "That's the signal man," he whispered. The phrase rippled through the rows like a tide returning. Marion gestured to Eli. "Would you show them?" Eli nodded, setting a small brass key on the podium. He tapped carefully, 3 short, 1 long. The sound carried through the hall, delicate yet certain, the heartbeat of a story made visible. A young girl whispered, "That's the sound that saved them." Eli smiled. "That's the sound of someone hearing back." Harold approached the table. He lifted the headset once more, feeling its familiar weight, then placed it beside the logbook inside the display case. Marion said softly, "They belong together." "Always did," Harold answered. He stepped back, letting the light settle on both objects, proofs of a life spent listening. Cal moved to stand beside him, silent, humbled. The townspeople, fishermen, students, shopkeepers, veterans, formed a quiet ring, every layer of the community present in witness. Outside, gulls called over the water. Inside, the power hum dimmed until it sounded almost like breathing. The quiet that remained felt earned. Harold's voice, low but steady, filled that space. "Some signals never fade with time." No one moved. The phrase hung like mist above the plaque, then settled into the room's timbers as if etched there. Eli tapped the code again, 3 short, 1 long, a reply to the man who had once answered first. The rhythm drifted upward through open windows toward the tower, blinking green across the bay. Harold smiled faintly, turning toward the door. Each step matched the pulse he'd taught 3, then 1. Outside, sunlight flashed on wet pavement, and for the briefest second, the static of the sea returned, not warning, not distress, only connection. He paused, listening. Then he whispered the final words, only he could give, message received. The museum lights dimmed as the crowd drifted home, leaving only the soft hum of the exhibit cases and the scent of rain-cooled wood. On the wall, the brass plaque caught the lamp's glow, while the logbook and headset that rested beneath proof of a man who once turned noise into meaning. Still in that hush, the town seemed to breathe with him. Cal stood near the door, Eli beside the glass, both watching the quiet like students at a chapel. Kindness, he'd taught, isn't a broadcast, but a signal, returned a lamp in a winter window, steady for anyone still searching. Then, as the night custodian flipped the switch, a faint click came through the speaker, 3 short, 1 long, and Eli smiled. The old operator's voice had already become the town's heartbeat. Some signals never fade with time.